Theater, in its essence, has to tell stories that are important. And if you go back to the beginning of theater, it came through the Greeks. What were those stories they were telling? What were those stories about? And those stories were about the relationship between God and man, and the relationship of actions and the consequences of a human being's actions. And in essence, trying to understand collectively with the audience what the moral imperative of a society is. What is the essence of the event of theater? And always throughout history, that has a core of moral importance. But at the same time, again, back to the Greeks, at the core of it was an essence of entertainment. So at once you have, Sophocles, and you have the stories of God and man going against his moral code and the consequences of that. But you also have Aristophanes, and you have great comedy. And he takes that same dilemma, that same communication, and bring it into the absurd. And so it's important when we're doing theater to always remember that at the core of it, it is entertainment. It's not a lecture. It's not didacticism. It's not propaganda. It has to have a truth that is human. And part of what that truth of being human is not only the complexities of emotion, but also the imperative to try to transcend your existence and your obstacles and find the human spirit of survival, the ability to laugh, the ability to make fun of power, the ability to stand in the face of oppression and say, I will live beyond this, and I will laugh and I will dance in the face of your oppression. When we started developing the new Colossus, we were looking at the world, and we were looking at the Syrian refugee crisis, and we were seeing in Western media, not only in our country but in Europe, the rhetoric of talking about these refugees as potential terrorists. And for me, that was very irresponsible and completely untrue. These were mostly women and children, but some men that were escaping death. And if they could stay home, they would. No one wants to leave their home. But they had no choice because their home was being bombed. They were being terrorized. Their lives were threatened. So we felt it was necessary to create another dialogue, to look at who these people were. What is a refugee? And so we started asking questions of ourselves and our own history. Who are we as Americans? If we do not have 100% native blood, if we're not descended from indigenous nations, then we are, at some point in our history, refugees or immigrants. Most of the people in this cast of the New Colossus, English is a second language. And the way we work is to try to ask the actors to create from an honest, emotional place. No language comes without a full emotion. No movement comes without emotion. And so when we're asking people to work this way, what I came to understand was that when actors for whom English is a second language were doing this method, the language did not come from the emotion directly. It came from the emotion through the brain to translate into English, and then came to us in the audience. And so I asked these actors to start acting in their own native tongues. I asked them to start creating in workshop without English, to get at the core of the truth of the characters they were playing. And because we were doing this, we were seeing incredible revelations in these actors. We were seeing where they had been struggling before to translate and speak English. We were seeing a pure, direct delivery of a raw emotion. And so I was looking or dreaming of a piece that we could do where we weren't using English. And so that's how the new Colossus started. The first time we did the new Colossus, there was no English at all. And for me, the important essence of theater, the truth that is told in theater, all is in the honesty of the emotion. And it's not a casual emotion. There's no place for casual emotion in theater. We're telling stories that are important. They have to have important emotions. So there's no great play with a mildly depressed person. There's no great play with someone that's kind of happy or sort of sad or maybe a little bit terrified. You know, it all comes from the extremes. Great stories come from the extremes. The stories we want to tell on a stage should have that kind of importance and meaning. So when we're working, we look to that first. To earn the right to be on stage, one has to be completely possessed of an emotion. And if you start there, then you start telling stories from a higher level. And when you start telling stories from a higher level, you start finding deeper and more significant truth. And so if we start on day one with that, from the very first entrance of an actor, demanding that commitment to emotion and the truth of the emotion, you discover so much more, and you find yourselves not interested in telling insignificant stories. You find yourself looking for stories that are of importance to the world. And because we work with and through the audience, they are going to determine whether what we are doing is important or not. So there's a great quote from Gutowski who talked about the essence of theater being simply that, the actor and the audience. But it's a relationship. It's the chemistry that happens. And every night is different because every night there's a different group of strangers that have assembled in a dark place to experience something. So we have to be kinetically aware of each different night and each different composition of strangers. When Trump was elected, we were in China performing a play called Harlequino on to Freedom. And everyone was very sad about it. Remember, people were crying, shocked. We knew what was coming. But what I said to the cast was, well, it's terrible, but this is what the Actors Gang was made for. This time is what we are made for. We have no fear of telling truth to power. And now that's more important than ever before. And the play we were doing at the time, one of the stories in it, was the story of a slave who defies the state. And we're telling this in China. And I remember the first performance. At one point, the state interrupts the play. This is in the play, not the Chinese state, but within the play. It's interrupted, and an official from the state tells the actor to stop doing what he's doing and to do the play as it was written. And he tries, but he can't. And he continues to tell his truth in that moment. And so the official from the state interrupts the play again and essentially arrests the actor. And the actor walks out like this, and the person from the state behind him. And then they say, continue the play, and the other actors start to try to continue the play, but they can't. And another actor puts their hand up and starts to walk off the stage. And at that point, that Chinese audience erupts in applause. And we knew at this moment that what we're doing is essential. What we're doing is we're allowing that Chinese audience to celebrate the idea of defiance of the state in a comedy. The Marvel universe, the action movies, all have violence at the core of them. And violence is solving the problems, the obstacles, in all of these movies. And this is at its core radically political. Because essentially what it's saying is there is no room for diplomacy, compassion, empathy. All our problems must be solved through an epic battle. And it's a very, very dangerous thing to be telling society. And it just leads to more and more violence and more insensitivity to others. When you, and if you ask any of these people that create this, they'll say, oh, no, we're just doing entertainment. What are you talking about? It's not political. No, this is just cartoon comic book stuff. This isn't what? What do you mean? Well, yeah, it is a comic book, but the message behind the comic book is vigilantism, is saying that we have no room in our universe for the moral code of justice. We don't have a judge, a jury, and then we decide whether we should prosecute or punish this person. I, the individual, the hero, will decide your fate. I will be your judge, your jury, and your executioner. And that's a radically political thing to say. And if you want to tell a story about a hero that uses compassion and reason and diplomacy to solve problems, they're laughed out of the room. You're just like, no way, I'm not going to fund that movie. Why? Well, they'll tell you because it won't make any money. There's an active decision being made to not make those kinds of films. And that's sad. That's sad because I've lived through a time when movies were made like that. In the 70s, in the 80s, movies were being made that told a larger picture, were more complicated, exposed injustice. And you can look at just in the portrayal of the CIA alone in movies. You show me a movie in the last 15 years that's critical of the CIA. Why? Why not? There were in the 70s and 80s. What happened? A lot of people in power would have you believe that art is for distraction, that art is for the benign, it's beautiful. And people in power fund that kind of art. They want to promote the art of distraction. I think we've seen through history the art that is remembered is the art that stands in the face, stands in defiance of that kind of state oppression. Even in Chile, we still know the songs of Victor Jara. This touches something deep inside of me, and I'm not Chilean, but I've talked to many Chileans who come to tears when they speak of him. Why? Because he was telling the truth. And he was telling the truth to power in such a way that it became so dangerous they had to kill him. Not only did they kill him, but they destroyed his records, and they destroyed the musical instruments that he was bringing from all over Chile, the indigenous instruments. They had to destroy the musical instruments. Think about that. Think about that. Because that's the power of art. Because it tells a truth that is remembered and hits you deep inside. And when you hear politicians or people in power say, actors shouldn't talk about politics, or musicians shouldn't deal in politics, what they're saying is they fear that. They don't want you to they don't want you to think about art as something that should be socially involved, because they know the power of it. They know the power of it to destroy them. So they must censor and they must intimidate. And in the past, they did this with actual violence. And so what we have to realize now is, yes, that still happens in parts of the world, but it also happens by just simply ignoring it or not putting it in the public square of the media. And so we have to understand that the essence of truth is not necessarily going to come to us in our televisions. Or the essence of truth is not necessarily going to be a pop song that you hear continuously on the radio. The essence of truth you might have to look for. You might have to explore. You might have to find it in a neighborhood, in a small club, in a small theater. But it's there, and there are people telling that truth. And this is why I do theater. This is why I do the music that I do. Because I feel it's more important to tell the truth to 1,000 people than it is to lie to 1,000,000 people.